What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday, and welcome to the first Eat, Train, Prosper episode of the new year. Happy New Year to all of our listeners out there, and thank you guys once again for sticking around as Bryan and I begin year 3 together of the podcast. As always, just a thank you and just amazing opportunity that I'm always gracious for and happy to speak with Bryan each week around eating food, lifting weights, and achieving prosperity in our efforts of doing so. Today, we are going to talk around a little bit of a different approach on the new year, kind of new me fat loss sort of thing. So, what we're going to kind of shift the conversation to is a wise person's guide for making sustainable long-term changes in the new year with some not so common approaches and perspectives that most people are not talking about. Personally, as someone who talks about eating food, fat loss, pretty much year round, I have begun to personally get a little bit kind of wanting to not play the same game as everyone else is and using it in the beginning of the year as like a kind of a sales tactic for new clients and that sort of thing. So if you've noticed on my socials and stuff, I haven't had much. I've been doing some kind of ninja marketing, which is just some very subtle, no words transformation posts and stuff of clientele, but I haven't been kind of hard on my stories or any kind of marketing tactic for a particular reason. And that's kind of what about some of the things that we're going to talk about, because I just personally, and then obviously Bryan felt aligned with we could do a different kind of service, doing a little bit more profound insight into some of these things. But before we get into that, as always, Bryan, can you kick us off with some updates?
Yeah, for sure, man. It's really an honor to be starting year 3 here, and like you said, super cool that it's a way for you and I to connect every week, which I love. So super cool. And then to kind of reflect on your point about the New Year's stuff, man. I find all that like super hype New Year's marketing to just be so cringy. I really struggle with a lot of the sales pieces that go into that side of the marketing and how like immediate a solution it all comes across as, whereas we'll find in this episode, I think that, taking a more gradual, sustainable approach is probably something that's going to help you in life as opposed to helping you for 3 weeks. So yeah, it should be a good episode, but just a couple quick updates as we didn't get to speak last week to you guys. We had a polar vortex sweep across our country. And by the time this comes out, it's going to be like 3 or 4 weeks away from when it actually happened. But the significance of it was huge as far as how it affected my, Christmas, New Year's vacation. So they canceled school the final 2 days when it was planned to have school. So Thursday and Friday, when it was like negative 17 degrees or whatever it was, there was no school. And this was bad because obviously that was 2 days that I didn't get to work that I wanted to, but also because most of the winter gear that my kids use when it's snowy out, like their boots, specifically the boots, were left at school. And so we had 8 inches of snow one day, and then we had like 3 or 4 inches another day, and we had no snow boots at all. So I took Bryson out for a long hike. He wore tennis shoes. So I wore tennis shoes because I wanted to experience what he was experiencing. And it was awful. It was not fun. I do not recommend hiking in the snow with tennis shoes. And I took him sledding twice. And so he wore rain boots one of the days, which I don't know if that was better or worse than the tennis shoes, because the rain boots are like kind of open at the top. So every time he would trudge through the snow, it would just like pile into the rain boot and like fill up the rain boot with snow. It was very far from ideal outdoor experience. Like we really didn't get to enjoy the outdoors nearly as much or as seamlessly as we would have liked. And then kind of add to that so my wife's sister and her boyfriend came to stay with us over the holidays, and they have 2 big dogs. We don't have dogs at our house. They have 2 big dogs, and so they couldn't fly. So they drove from New York City out here, literally during the polar vortex. So they said there were just like tractor trailers like strewn all over the highway. There was just like slippery spots everywhere, snowstorms and windstorms and like just a plethora of obstacles in their way to get here. They finally got here. Turns out one of the dogs is a purebred German Shepherd. I would say maybe is not always the nicest to people that she doesn't know. So this dog has stayed in their room downstairs for the last 9 days and not really left except to come up, go outside, run around, go to the bathroom, come back in. So there's like this odd feeling in the air around my house where it's like at any moment this killer dog might escape from the basement and like kill us in our sleep or whatever. It's just obviously that we don't really actually think that, but it's just kind of this funny idea, this whole like, wow, there's like a killer dog staying in our basement. It's just so weird. And then the other dog is like this super friendly, completely harmless, lovable mutt type thing. But anyway, just some funny stories that changed kind of the way that I thought my vacation would have gone. So, do you have anything to say on any of that?
No, it just when you gave that little synopsis, it reminded me of that movie from like, oh man, I think the late '80s, Cujo, which was literally like about like a killer dog who was just
Okay.
fucking killing people.
Okay. Yeah. So luckily no one's died yet. So that's good. The funniest is like Vivi, who's almost 3. We're trying to get her not to go downstairs. So like the kids have lost the basement as like a play area. But like every time now she'll go to the top of the stairs and she'll be like, we can't go downstairs. That dog gonna bite me. And so then we're just like, no, Viv, like she probably won't bite you, but it is good to be cautious. So anyways, moving on. I am finally finishing up week 6 of my second mesocycle in my hypertrophy program. And it has been super productive. I've made some progress on pretty much everything. I can't remember if on the last episode I had bought my 110-pound dumbbells yet. I think I had discussed that I needed to because I had 2 movements, the weighted hip extension and the single leg RDL, where the hundreds were just like the rep ranges were getting too high. So I went out and spent a bunch of money on 110-pound dumbbells, only to realize that I'm actually going to be too strong for those if I'm not already. So what I should have done was, instead of spending $330 on 2 dumbbells, I should have bought the Prime Open Trap Bar, which was a little more expensive than that, but it probably would have been a better use of my money and would have allowed me to do single leg RDLs with rear foot elevated without the back part of the trap bar getting in the way. And then I'm sure I could figure out a way to load it up and maneuver it around my hip extension machine to be able to do hip extensions with that too, where a barbell is just a little bit too long. I am still going to probably end up ordering an open trap bar here at some point. It doesn't seem like anyone else has done the open trap bar with rotating D handles. And that's one of the big things that I want, because there are a bunch of open trap bars, but they have set handles, or there are closed trap bars that have D handles. But I think Prime is the only one, at least that I could find off the top of my search, that seem to be open with D handles that rotate. But if anyone knows of any other brands that might be less expensive, I'm super open to that as well. Although, to be honest, I'll probably have ordered it already by the time this podcast comes out. I'll be jumping into my strength cycle here. By the time this episode drops, I think I'll be in my strength cycle. So if anyone would like to join me, you can sign up on Bryan's program through the Paragon Training Methods website. And I'll also drop some links in my stories and stuff along the way. But it'll basically be like a 3 to 6 week strength cycle, a neural phase, 3 times a week, full body. Probably 4 to 5 weeks is going to be the sweet spot, like 3 to 6, just to kind of hedge my bets on either side. And then we'll just kind of jump back into hypertrophy and go from there. One of the things that I've found that I really liked about the way I've executed the last 2 weeks of my hypertrophy cycle is that I kind of fell off with my push-pull legs split. It was about 2 or 3 weeks ago where I fell off, and I started separating out quads from hams. And then that kind of effect snowballed a little bit. And I could never get back on schedule, because by doing quads one day and then I had like a random unexpected rest day, and then it was hams the day after that. So hams were 2 days, or no, it was the other way around. It was hams then quads. So by the time that I would get back to leg day again, my hams were fully recovered, but my quads were still smashed. So I was never able to actually get back to the PPL split. And what I ended up doing was pairing hams with back and pairing quads with biceps and then having an upper body push day. And that actually worked out really, really well. It was something really nice about, when you do quads, all you have to do after that is biceps. Like you can easily do biceps after quads, not a big deal. But doing quads and hams together was super hard. And then upper body push is kind of just a fun day that doesn't really like super challenging. And then the hams and back day is obviously pretty gnarly. That's like a pretty brutal combination of two. But it also allows me the opportunity to split those into 2 days if I want to. So I could just do hams and then the next day do back, and then I have my quads biceps day and my upper body push day. So then this is like a 4-day split. So anyways, I really like that. And another thing that I really like about that, aside from the ease of pairing these muscle groups together, is antagonistic training. So like I tend to rest 4 to 5 minutes between sets of really fatiguing big movements. But I do that because my actual muscles need 4 to 5 minutes to be able to repeat the performance. It's not my cardiovascular system that's limiting me. So I realize that when I have these like quads and biceps day or the hams and back days, that I really like alternating movements. I'll do a set of leg curls. I'll do a set of pull downs. I'll do a set of hip extensions. I'll do a set of T-bar rows, something along those lines. And so it ended up, my workouts were way, way, way faster because I was still getting 4 to 5 minutes of rest between the same movement, but I was with the antagonistic pairing. My cardio was fine. My muscles were still getting recovered. So I think my next hypertrophy cycle after this 3 times a week strength is going to focus on having antagonistic pairings like that allow me to use that kind of time saving element, because training in 60 to 75 minutes is much better than 90 to 100 minutes or something like that, amplified over the course of the weeks and the cycles and stuff like that. So I have one more update that kind of feeds us into our topic for the day. So before I jump to that, let's head over to you and hear what's going on. I know you're back in Bali and everything.
Yes, back in Bali. We'll be here for a year, which I'm super excited about. And that may be, this May, right? Things can change. It may be the final kind of hurrah of the adventure travel life that Jenny and I have lived for 4 years now, I think. So 2019.
Time for babies, right?
Not quite, but time to stop gypsying around and get a vehicle and in the house somewhere and that sort of shit. The biggest things that I really mind is I'm about to cross 200 pounds again, which I am always super, super excited for. And then I've committed to like a gaining phase for like the next 3 months, have the entire year of coaching outlined. I've hired Jackson, and I'm super excited about that. It's just someone who obviously I respect his nutrition work and the detail in there, but I'm always just excited to see what I can learn from, people who are more experienced, more knowledgeable than I am. So there's that part. And then just the way he operates, I really kind of respect. It's like a very no bullshit. You said you want to be here, let's be here sort of thing. And I really kind of like that, like pressure. This is something that I'll have, conversations with about when people are, but you have a coach and you're a coach. And I'm like, yes, I fucking write people's plans all day long. When it comes to doing mine, I'm not going to fucking do it. I'm just going to be like, this is good enough. This is what I've been doing. But it's human nature. You kind of will gravitate towards what is easier or what your habits have been. And kind of what we're going to get into the episode is like, there's going to be a part where you come to that crossroads and you always go left and you need to start going right. And one of the simplest ways to help you force going right is to spend your money on someone else to tell you to go right. Because there's that aspect of, I don't want to throw this money away, but then also I don't want to be an asshole and say, hey, can you help me with this? And then they say yes. And then you just go do what you want to do anyway. So for me, like, I just know whenever I have a coach, it brings out the best in me. My training gets much, much better. My nutrition adherence is all, a lot better. Really cool things happen, right? So I'm super excited about that. And I gave him like the reins of everything, like diet, training. We're following a very, very low volume training program with like lots of intensity stuff, which has actually been really, really fun. I've only completed 2 days, and I botched by training legs on Saturday, and then quads is like the first day of the plan Monday. So I like very very brought things down just to like find some weights and stuff because I just couldn't train them again. But I didn't want to, get off my first week already. But I'm excited just for it's like more playground type stuff and just showing up and just working really, really hard. And I'm excited about that.
I have a couple questions here. So how much over 200 pounds do you feel like you're going to end up here?
It's hard to say. So one of the outlines I gave him when I reached out or when I said, "Hey, can you take over my training and stuff for me?" I said I want to reclaim like all the lost muscle that I, had. Summer, kind of fall 2021 was like my best, I would say, physique has ever been. When I had that DEXA in Utah, I was like 191, 192 shredded. And unfortunately now I'm like 190. Well, today I was 199, but the last couple months I've been like the 197 and not nearly as lean. And then you can obviously see that like some muscle mass was decreased as well. And I think honestly, a part of that is spending too much time trying to stay not too lean, but not really dedicating to like, okay, I'm going to now get weight, push food, up enough to that I can kind of reclaim everything. So that is kind of my effort now. And then the goal of like, I want summer, well, it should technically be like winter here in the Southern Hemisphere of 2023 to be better than, I want to beat my best. I don't know. I think realistically before that diet, I was up to like 207. So I would imagine maybe anywhere in like the 205, 210, very, very loose, but that's going to be a lot of food.
Well, we'll have to get a DEXA at some point and see if you can cross that 200 pounds at 10% body fat threshold that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I'm very confident there's no DEXs over here.
Yeah, totally. Well, maybe next year when you get back to the US.
Yeah.
And then my other question was, I obviously love the idea of a low volume program with high intensity, but I'm curious what the split is and approximately how many sets per week per muscle group you're doing.
So split is like a lower quad focus, an upper push, upper pull, a lower ham focus, and then an upper mixed. So that is a split, 5 training days. And then
so push, pull, legs, upper, lower. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or legs, push, pull, lower, upper.
I think I can't remember if I think the quad day doesn't have any like hamstring. It's just like, okay, we have like a squat pattern movement, a leg press sort of thing. So there's obviously going to be like some glute and some ham, and then complete, kind of vice versa on the ham day.
Cool.
And then volume, I haven't written the entire thing out in the app, but there is a lot of like intensity techniques and things. So some of it gets like kind of hard to quantify.
Right.
For example, like one of them today was like a dual rope tricep push down sort of thing. And then like a top set, back off, and then myo reps essentially until max myo reps until I can only get 3 good reps. So I ended up doing like technically like 7 mini sets on that. Mm-hmm. And that gets kind of hard to like, okay, how am I quantifying that volume sort of thing?
Right. How about rep ranges? I know we had talked about in the past how you had been lowering your rep ranges down into that more of like that 6 to 10, 7 to 9 range. Are you still there, or have you working in some higher rep ranges now?
There is some higher rep ranges. There's a lot of like 8 to 12s, some like 10 to 12s. There is some things that are like 15 plus, which I have not done any kind of 15 plus in a while. Like today, that was lateral raises. So that one was like, okay, I have to plan like and intelligently select a weight. Fortunately, when you have like logs of all the things, you're like, okay, 7 weeks ago, I was able to do like 11 kilos for 9 reps. I need to get 15. Okay, I think I did 8 today, and I did make that. So
cool.
Yeah, things like that. But I'm excited. I'm excited for the sessions are a little bit shorter too, which has been cool.
Cool. I'm actually going to save my last update since it's about New Year's kind of focal points. We'll save that for the intro into our actual discussion today. But before we jump into the discussion, we did have a quick unrelated question from a guy who listens and super big fan of us. So I wanted to make sure that we address this. So the question was, any reasoning, practical or theoretical, for why certain rep ranges would work better for shortened versus lengthened movements? And then the second part of the question was, does exercise order play into this at all? And so I know I think we agree on this, but I'll kick it over to you and let you kind of get the first reaction here.
Yeah. So what I just jotted down my thoughts of like my initial reaction here, and like being completely transparent, like this could be wrong. And I'm okay. I'm okay with that, but I'll kind of just read it out here to make sure I get it across in a coherent manner. Is like my initial response is that the shortened movements are generally going to work better with higher rep ranges. Reasoning here is that taking shortened overload movements at low rep ranges, let's say less than 6, the movement will just be like really, really hard to perform. And then the chances of compromising form increase exponentially in an attempt just to move the weight. So,
Yeah.
like the example here is like, what is the textbook example for like a shortened overload movement? Dumbbell lateral raises, right?
Yep.
Imagine trying to do like the 40s for like a set of 5. They're not gonna fucking go anywhere unless you're like jumping them and swinging them, and then it's like why are we choosing this movement at that sort of thing? And when you think about it for something like let's say a squat or a lengthened overload, like you can do it, but you're really strong in those lengthened positions. You're not really strong in most exercises in the shortened position. So doing it for smaller rep ranges, it's just a very, very challenging movement. And it would be very challenging to keep quality form because of that.
Yeah, that's literally exactly what I was going to say too. The dumbbell lateral raise is even the example I was going to use because it's the same as like any movement that is like super short overloaded. You can think of like a bent over dumbbell row as well if you want, but because we're so weak in the short position, it's two things. It's if it's like the strength curve is short overloaded, so like your body actually gets weaker at that position, but then the movement itself is also overloaded there. So when you have these movements that like you're weakest in a row as your hands get closer to your body, regardless of the resistance curve, like you're just going to be weaker there. And then you're also using a resistance curve that's weaker there. It becomes so challenging at that point to get short that like if you are doing a set of 5 reps using your rep number that you mentioned, you're not going to be able to get short at heavy weights because you're so weak there. And so it's going to inevitably incur the use of momentum, body English, and things like that so that you can get short. Whereas when you look at the way that like a lengthened movement fails, oftentimes there's no grinding reps, or maybe there's like one grindy rep. But like if you get out of the bottom of a squat barely, it's not like you're going to try another one and you can just body English your way up. Like if you're just going to get buried down there. And that's just not the case with like a lateral raise or a row variation where, you'll get 90% of that range of motion on the next rep. So I don't think we need to get carried away with like the high and low rep range thing though. I think like even subtle changes in that are fine. Like for example, as I've gone over this last year and I've found so much productivity in using lower rep ranges that like most of my lengthened movements are 5 to 8. And then most of my short movements are 7 to 10 or 7 to 11. So I'm not talking about like having to go up to 12 to 15 reps just because you're doing a short overload movement. But I do think that a lot of that comes with experience. And so if this listener I know is super experienced, but just general people, you people listening, if you're not super experienced on how to stay super strict with your form and grind through reps to get to the short position, then you probably would be better off doing higher reps. Like for most of my general population programs, my group programs, anytime we're doing like a dumbbell lateral raise, specifically like a no loss of tension one. So one of those ones where you stop the rep before your arms actually get to the bottom. So it is very, very short. Those are always for like, 12 to 15 to 20 reps, something like that. So I'll never have those programmed any lower than that. But as I've discussed on prior episodes, if you do a dual cable lateral raise that's super at wrist height, so it's very lengthened, overloaded, the hardest part of that rep is the bottom 30% of it. And then once you get going on the upper portion of the range of motion, it actually drops off and gets easier. So it resembles the resistance curve of a squat much more than you would expect probably from a lateral raise. And so for that movement, 5 to 8 reps is fine. Like I do sets of 5 all the time, 5, 6, 7, 8. I also think rep speed tempo is a huge piece of this. So like when I do my dual cable lateral raises for sets of 6, say, that set of 6 takes me 55 seconds. So we're talking about 9 seconds per rep. And that's because it's a huge range of motion. You know, that arm is all the way behind my back. And then it's like just to get through the concentric is 3 seconds or so. And then the descent is 3 seconds. And then there's like a 2-second pause at the bottom in the stretched position. So every rep is a ton of time under tension. And that's just not something you would get with like a dumbbell lateral raise. Like nobody actually executes dumbbell lateral raises with 9 seconds per rep type tempo. So I think that is definitely a piece of what goes into choosing your rep ranges for these movements too. And then the last part of the question was, does exercise order play into this at all? I don't really think so. I mean, I think in general, it makes sense to go from short movements to lengthened movements, because once you've exhausted the short position, you are still strong in the lengthened position. But the reverse is not true. So once you've exhausted the lengthened position, that will actually have impact on your ability to get short as well. So I love just ordering in general, going short and then lengthen. So that might be a leg extension and then a pendulum squat. It might be a dumbbell lateral raise, then a dual cable lateral raise. Might be a tricep push down and then a overhead tricep extension or something along those lines. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yep, I agree completely. And that's exactly the order that I did mine in today as well.
Cool. Well, jumping into the topic today, I figure I would open this New Year's discussion with some of my focal points. So a couple things for me that I'm working on is higher quality food to facilitate getting more fiber. And so I've been getting a lot of my fiber throughout the day from my Quest bar, because that's 15 grams of fiber, but it's not what I would consider high quality food fiber. So one of my focuses this year is to eat sufficient amounts of fruit and vegetables and high quality grains and starches so that I can get to that 15 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories of food consumed without having to get 15 grams from a Quest bar. And so this is one of these, we'll get into kind of the process of making New Year's resolutions and stuff like that. But this is one where I think it will align pretty well with the discussion that we have. A couple other things that I'm working on this year are getting natural light early. And so this is something that I usually do, I'd say 5 days a week without even having to think about it. I want to try and do it 7 days a week without having to think about it. I want to make it a habit that I get outside and I stare up at the sky, or I go for a 5 or 10 minute walk every morning as soon as it gets light out. Try to regulate some circadian rhythm stuff that way. Second, I'm trying to consume caffeine 75 to 90 minutes after I wake up instead of right when I wake up. I think that should be something that is helpful. Huberman has talked about it a lot in regulating circadian rhythm and stuff as well. And then the big one that when we talk about the way that we phrase New Year's resolutions, one of the things that I want to talk about is not saying none of this, but instead to make them more positive affirmations instead of things that you're going to take away. But here's one that I'm going to take away just because I need to say this. So I'm committing to not smoking weed anymore. I'm just going to eat it. So maybe I could phrase that question as, I will eat weed and not smoke it. I don't know how the best way of phrasing that is. But one thing, like I've talked about on the podcast before, that I have ubiquitously low VO2 max compared to like what I would expect given the amount of biking and playing outside and things that I do. My VO2 max just doesn't really change much. I think that this is an experiment for me, kind of like an N of one type thing. Like if I don't smoke weed and I just eat it, does that improve my VO2 max and potentially other variables of health? So it'll be an interesting thing. I'll keep you guys updated on the podcast as we go through, but I'm kind of excited about this. And that's one of the tenets of goals that we want to set here in the new year is to do things that we're excited about. So we can kind of jump into the conversation from here. You can piggyback off of any of that, or just kind of, take the conversation where you want to take it from there.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love the goal of like quitting things. Not, and I don't want to frame it up in any way. I've just had like such good positive experiences with it, of realizing like there are these aspects of my life that I realized that I just don't need. And if I never would have taken this like challenge without them, I never would have realized that. So I love that. And it should be really cool, as you are very objective with so much of what you do, to see what we can get from like the VO2 max or any kind of other possible health markers out of that.
Yep.
Kind of like there's a couple ways we kind of set this conversation up. So what Bryan and I both did is we put together like our top three kind of like facets of ways to approach things in the for the new year. And the thing that I wanted to start off with, and Bryan, I would imagine you and I will go back and forth kind of how we normally do, is one of the things that I see is, and I know this so well because I did this for years, or I would say like, okay, I want to save, $20,000 this year or whatever. And then I would completely forget about it by like the second week of February. And all of a sudden it's like October and I have nothing put away, sort of thing. Same thing with fat loss. People say, okay, I want to lose 25 pounds by July. And then they're at the end of March, they're nowhere yet on this goal. And then they're like, oh, I got to kick it into overdrive, sort of thing. And we all know that there's always a means to an end. The faster something happens, the faster it's going to go away. I'm laughing because Bryan's just cleaning his screen right now. But what I wanted to say is like, instead, just break it down into goals that you need to show up for almost daily. So instead of 25 pounds by, July, it's 4 pounds per month or 1 pound per week, which is super, super reasonable. And just running a 7-day moving average, different things like that to really help you keep your head in the game. And then one of my favorite parts around restructuring something like this is this helps you build momentum through positive reinforcement. So this is something that I make sure with some of my newer clients, right? They'll have like, oh, Aaron, this wasn't a great week, and they'll rate themselves like a C or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to lie to you and say it was the best week ever, but we have our lowest average weigh-in that we ever have had. How can this be a terrible week when we have the best objective metric we've ever had in terms of your, weight movement or something like that? So making sure the positive reinforcement is there through showing up daily and then moving your big goals into something you need to show up for like daily, weekly is the first one on my list.
Yeah, totally. I love all of that, of course. And that resonates a lot with some of the ones that I have listed as well. But the first one I have listed is be process oriented instead of outcome oriented. And so a good example here would be increase quality foods instead of lose 15 pounds or whatever the number is for you. And this is kind of the way that I am thinking about that fiber one that I put at the top of my list, is by increasing the amount of fiber that I eat, just that one singular focus on increasing fiber, it actually probably will have an effect on my body weight. But my goal is not to lose body weight. But if I end up losing body weight because I'm eating more broccoli and less brownies, then that's kind of a net win, right? So I think that making those kind of process oriented goals are important. And then kind of piggybacking off of that one, I think that being more process oriented helps you increase motivation. So that's my second one, is choosing goals that you're excited about. And you're, again, going back to the process, you're excited about the prospect of working towards that goal and making that process ubiquitous across your next year, your life, whatever kind of your time domain is for that.
Yeah. And with that one, I think so many people, and again, I have been so guilty of all of these, which is why I have a good knowledge of them. Try and set goals from a place of things you don't really want to do, right? So it's like, my wife, I'm here because my wife and my doctor said I need to be here, right? Not because I want to be here. when you have something like that, it's always a means to an end. And fortunately, in the health and fitness space, there are many ways to kind of skin your goal, for lack of a better term. Like it can be maybe you're in the gym lifting weights, maybe you get into CrossFit, maybe you go into F45 or an Orange Theory or something like that. If that community based approach gets you going, showing up, is more motivating. Same thing with diet. Bryan and I generally approach a rather moderate kind of diet approach. We're going to have a lot of the macronutrients, different things like that, but maybe you are going to resonate or want to belong in one of the more diet based crowds. As much as I generally do not try and encourage people to fall into a diet based approach, if it's what is going to get you there and initially get your feet wet, and then you can kind of branch out from there, by all means, please do that. But know that there's the process in wanting to be there and enjoying that process enough to show up consistently is a massive, massive first step that so many people don't see the process. They only see the result and they hate the process.
Yeah, I mean, like falling in love with the process. Like it's kind of this overstated thing, but like it really needs to happen. Like you need to find ways to kind of trick your brain, if that's the way that you have to do it, into making the process something that you look forward to every single day, that you wake up like excited to attack that process. And so one of the things, like my third one, is focus on things you can do versus things that you shouldn't do. And so this is why I was laughing about the weed one that I said in the beginning, because it would be silly for me to be like, my focus is to eat more weed. Like that would be not the right approach. So in this one, I almost have to say that I'm going to smoke less weed. But I think that in general, the more that you can state your goals, where they're things that you're going to try to do instead of things that you want to eliminate, then that modifies behaviors, which is again, going back to my fiber example. I'm saying I can eat more fiber. And in doing so, that's going to have that like downstream trickle down effect onto eating less other shit, whether it's, increasing satiety or just making different food choices. But I really like the idea of focusing on the things that I am going to do instead of the things that I'm not going to do.
So this one that I actually had in position 3, but it makes perfect sense to bring it in here. And the simple kind of way that I like to approach this is like your life is already full, right? Each one of our lives is already full. Some of us have things that are more kind of like necessities. Other people have less like kind of free time. I'm using air quotes here, but you fill that free time with something. This is something that I think when people reach out to a coach or start working with a coach, they think like, okay, I'm going to add this on top of my life, right? Or like, oh man, I don't really have time, but I'm going to get up and go train at 4:30 in the morning when they're not going to bed until 11. Like that might work for like 7 days, and then it's all going to fall apart, sort of thing. So you cannot simply add more on top of an already full life, and that might be your meal prep or your new gym routine commitment, sort of thing. Like you will need to replace something in your life with this new thing. And that can be, probably it would be best if it's some of your not like high priority kind of things. Like obviously don't put your family and children and stuff like that down below the list, but it is really important to understand like you do need to replace something of what's already buying your time to make this work, like long-term sustainable sort of thing. If you try and just like white knuckle yourself at 4:30 on 5.5 hours of sleep, you're going to feel like dog shit after 10 days and not want to do it anymore.
Yeah, I think that feeds perfectly into my next one, which is modify behaviors gradually. And so again, like if your life is full, as Aaron says, and you try to go make even one massive change into your life, much less like 2 or 3, then that's going to be a huge impact on just the way that you live your life. And there are going to be things that, using your term white knuckling, like you're constantly having to be aware of these, and they're like almost consuming your mind. And so I think that by gradually instituting changes into your life, whatever the increment is that makes sense. Like I don't know. I would never have a client like try to change three things all at once dramatically in their life. Like choose one that you believe is very achievable so that it builds what's the self-determination. Is that right? Or so I feel like there's a type of statement here that I'm missing, but you build validity for self validity, maybe like it reinforces positivity in your behaviors when you succeed at something, and then you then are more likely to succeed at the next thing. Whereas if you fail at something, then you have this negative loop in your brain, and it's very difficult to break out of that once you've failed. So instead of setting goals that are so big that it's unlikely that you're going to achieve them, but hey, it's the new year, so fuck it. Like, I think that maybe being a little more cognizant of how large and what type of impact this is going to have on the way that you live your life on a day-to-day basis.
That's a really good one. I think perhaps positive reinforcement was what you were looking for there, but maybe
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah. No, I
Okay.
like that. Now, positive reinforcement is good. I feel like there is a term that I'm looking for, like some sort of self validation of some sort, but positive reinforcement totally works too.
Gotcha. And then kind of like the last one I have, and this one is I think is super super big. It's more of a mental thing than anything personally, because again, let me back up. I've made so many mistakes with setting goals and failing them, like in the past, like year after year, right? I think a big thing in personally, I think this has to do with like your relationship with yourself, right? I have broken numerous promises that I've made to myself over the years, like so many that I couldn't even begin to start. I've never broken a single promise to anyone else that I've like, we've communicated that. And I think it's like, it comes back to like your relationship with self versus your relationship with like your, significant other, your friends, family members, etc. With that, get your goals out of your head, right? So have a conversation with your significant other, your best friends, or it could even be strangers on the internet, right? To help hold you accountable by just putting it out there and saying, I am committing to doing these things this year, right? It creates an external pressure by letting people in on the things that you want to do that helps hold you more accountable, even if it's for like a kind of a negative, like let's say it's for an ego thing. I don't want someone to point out and said, hey, you were going to do this year and you didn't, right? That is coming from like a negative ego kind of driven place, but it is helping you reach your goals, right? So there are some things that can sometimes be viewed in a negative aspect, but can kind of light a fire under us to push us forward the way we want to go. So what I have here is like share your goals with your significant other or your best friends. On January 1st, Jenny and I, we got some coffee. We sat there. We were just like silent for like 30 minutes thinking about things. And then we sat there and shared our goals with each other. We checked in, made sure our big picture things were still in alignment. We went through finances to make sure that we can buy a house, next year and all these things that we want to do. And it just makes it like much more real when you're bringing someone else in that you really respect into your goals. And kind of the last thing I have with that, with nutrition, fat loss sort of related goals, ask for the support of those around you, right? If you have a close group of friends that you guys go out to dinner with or something like that, if you're trying to have a big fat loss effort or a health effort, whatever, tell your friends. If they're really really quality friends and are on your team, you guys, they will help you steer in more appropriate food options and selections. Maybe you guys go for a walk once weather gets nicer, as opposed to going to grab wine or something like that. Like that's a prime example of one that I've had great success with clients in the past. Is like we just redirected what they did with their friends to like meeting up at a big park and going on a walk as opposed to just boozing sort of thing. So the people in your circle, like bring them into your goals and they will help lift you up.
I love that so much. It's something I hadn't even like thought about, but when I reflect back on the way that I've gotten through my diet over the last 3 years, when I do that kind of annual like 3 or 4 month cut that I do, is I very much put it out into the Instagram world, and I do that thing where I post my body weight every single day, and I feed off of the accountability that provides me, where I know like shit, every single morning I'm going to have to take a picture of that scale and I'm going to have to post it on Instagram. And if I go off my diet and have an extra 500 calories today, that's going to show up over the next few days on the scale. And then I'm going to have to justify that somehow, even to myself and to the people that are following the journey. So I think that that's huge. And then I think that you could even take that one step further. And as you were talking, I was like, wouldn't that be cool if you could find somebody to actually go through that goal with you? So if your goal is, increase steps or something like that, like say you're like, I've been sedentary, so I want to increase to 8 or 10,000 steps a day. Well, find somebody that wants to do that with you. And now you have a walking buddy that's going to hold you accountable every day to go for a 30-minute walk to help get you 3,000 steps or something like that. So you can definitely take it a step further from just telling people about it to then kind of recruiting people that have similar goals to kind of do it with you. And I think that that's even more powerful.
Yeah, the accountability partner thing is huge. I mean, having accountability is I would say it's one of the main reasons that goals aren't met. Maybe number two, besides like a lack of an understanding or a decent plan. I briefly alluded to it in the beginning of the episode, but that's one of the reasons why having a coach can be so effective, because what it does is it changes the dynamic of your relationship with your goal by entangling it with your relationship with money. And money does this very strange thing to us as humans, where we don't want to piss our money away, right? You take the same goal without the concept of money. Let's say you get like 30% to your goal and you fall off. You add in, you're on the hook for $300, $400, $500 a month, for the next 6 months. Your likelihood of achieving that goal exponentially increases just because of the relationship you have with wasting that money. It's insane, but it is true, especially like, and that's obviously $300, $400, $500, let's say for 6-8 months. It means different things to different people. But one of the things, right, I rarely get kind of like monetary pushback on coaching and prices and stuff in this day and age. But one of my favorite things in the times that I would say like, okay, I have a little thought experiment for you. Go back up over the last 6 months and add up all of your Uber Eats receipts, all of your money spent on alcohol, and all of your like restaurant meals, right? There's your coaching budget right there and more. And the ironic thing is, like, even with it, even without the money, like if those things are in place at the current rate that they are, you can achieve the goal anyway. So it's a very fascinating, and I'm sure someone who knows much more about human psychology than I could really break it down. But it's just something that's been, someone who just, it's what I do all day long, all week long, all year long, is like work with people around like mindset around eating and food and habits and that sort of thing. It's wild what that simple relationship really changes the dynamic there.
Yeah, reprioritization of the way you spend your money can have a huge impact. Cool. Do you want to jump into some practical stuff real quick before we wrap this up?
Let's do it.
I have two and a half or three practical takeaways here. So if your goal is to lose weight, which I think is the goal of many in the new year, then I think a good first step for you is finding the macronutrient that you can do with less of, whether that's fat or carbs, because it has to come from somewhere, and we don't want to sacrifice protein. Our listeners all know this. But so I posted on Instagram a couple days ago, just a simple question asking people what their goals were for the new year. And obviously a lot of them are weight loss, but I was very surprised at the amount of people that, when I would reply back to their statement of my goal is to lose weight or whatever it is, and I'd say, okay, so what's your plan with, are you going to go lower fat or lower carb? Or, how are you going to kind of manipulate these? And a lot of people are like, oh, I haven't really thought about that at all. And so you don't have to necessarily choose fat or carbs to go lower with. Like you could go a little bit lower on both of them to facilitate a caloric deficit. So there definitely isn't like one that you have to choose. But I think that it is important for you to be aware going into it, which is the lever that you're going to pull when the time comes. Because you could definitely start the diet by just doing a little less carbs and a little less fat and keeping it relatively even. But at some point along the diet, you're going to reach a point where some lever has to be pulled. And so knowing whether for you that's going to be pulling fats down or pulling carbs down is, I think, an important piece of the pie that will facilitate an easier journey along the way. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, it couldn't be any closer to the truth. The one little wrinkle I would say in there, and this one is a very tiny wrinkle. Generally, the first macronutrient I recommend pulling is alcohol. That one is easiest, and then reframing your relationship with stress management and different things like that for like your day to day. Obviously, gatherings, date nights, that sort of thing, completely understandable. But that's one of the easiest things to do is just improve alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that one, it's going to be hugely independent or individual.
Yeah.
I think once we get into like healthier body compositions, we're talking about optimization. We've had this conversation many times on the podcast before, but choosing your battle of like, do I want more carbs? Do I want more fat? And that may change, right? But that is first practical step, huge, of just mentally making a decision.
Yeah. My next one is using diagnostics to your advantage. And so I'll just continue with kind of the weight loss example, even though I think diagnostics can apply to any goal that you have. But like, for example, if your goal is to lose weight here in some capacity, then weighing yourself in some matter of consistency, I think, is important. I'm a huge proponent of weighing yourself every day so that you get a weekly average instead of just once a week where it's just like a snapshot of how it is in that moment. But if you're weighing yourself every day, then that's one diagnostic point that you have. And then you are tracking calories. In theory, you should be. So now that's another diagnostic that you have. Okay, my body weight is trending down. I'm eating X number of calories. Okay, my body weight stopped trending down. Maybe I need to reduce the calories, or maybe you need to add steps. And so there's this third component. It's your body weight, it's your calories, and it's the amount of movement that you get. And so there's kind of these two different levers you can pull. And so when the point comes where, say, the scale gets sticky for 2 weeks or whatever you have decided is the number that's reasonable, then you have to pull a lever. And so is that lever going to be a further reduction in calories or an increase in steps or movement, additional cardio or whatever? And so this then plays into my third one, which is the role of cardio in fat loss. And I think that we can look at the research by Poncer over the years and see that there's some pretty clear indications that energy compensation is a real thing. And so what he's pretty much demonstrated over a number of studies in the last 6-7 years is that if you're at maintenance or in a surplus and you do cardio, you're essentially going to get credit, in air quotes, for all of the calories that you burn during that cardio session. So say you go out and you run 3 miles and you think you burn 500 calories. If you're eating at maintenance or surplus, then you probably burn 500 calories. If you're in a deficit, our bodies actually compensate against the energy that you burn. And so you may get credit, in air quotes, for only 300 calories, despite the fact that you ran the same distance in the same amount of time that burned you 500 calories when you were in a surplus. And so for that reason, I think that cardio is just an extremely inefficient lever for you to pull. It's one that you may, in fact, need to pull. But if you're in a position to pull calories out, that is almost always going to be a more effective intervention than adding additional cardio. Thoughts on that?
That right there, like your last sentence, it's the biggest like fallacy in the fitness space. Is everyone's like, man, I got to get my, and don't get me wrong, I fucking love lifting weights. It's my absolute favorite thing in the world to do. I love it. So many people live in, they die on that hill, not realizing that from a time investment standpoint, the nutrition will move the needle so much further. And that, I mean, it's a fantastic example. Like to go out and, run, I know we're making this number up, but to go out and run 3 miles for 300 calories, right? That's, let's assume you're in like decent shape, right? Like, to be completely honest, I don't think I could go out there and run 3 8-minute miles. I don't think I could go out there and run 3 9-minute miles. I don't think I could do it. You know, that's like what, about 30 minutes, right? Of a very hard, where I have fucking Fran lung, my heart's beating out of my chest. I feel awful. I'm miserable. What else I could do is swap my like whole grain or my like, whole wheat pasta or normal pasta for like a spaghetti squash. There's those calories. And
Yeah.
my volume of food and satiety goes up. So that's where it's like knowing how to play the game or hiring someone who knows how to play the game. Like you can, from a time and effort investment, go further with a seemingly less miserable investment. Like unless you love pasta and can't go without it, which in that case, you're going to have to take the low fat approach.
Yeah, no, totally, and that's also an option. Like, yeah, so you love pasta, great. Well, you're going to have to do it without like butter or oil or a lean cut of meat with it. Like maybe you go spaghetti squash and you can have a fillet or a tri-tip or something, or you go
Mm-hmm.
with like the alternative and you have to have like a super lean chicken breast or turkey breast or something along those lines. So, no, I think that's really well said, and I feel like I had another point on the cardio thing, and oh yeah, I remember what my other point was. So the other downstream effect of doing cardio, like what Aaron described, like if you go out and you run 3 miles and it's like a relatively hard effort. So if you do a moderately hard effort of cardio, then that's going to have downstream effects on the quality of your weight training session. Whether directly, it's probably your legs, like you're going to perform worse on your squatting movements and your leg extensions, like curls and stuff like that, but it could even have effects just on your weight training in general, as it's an additional stressor and puts you into a catabolic state where you're already in this like super catabolic state because you're dieting and you're in a caloric deficit, and then doing this cardio just puts you into like a higher stress state even. So I could see that having a number of trickle down negative effects.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, same thing there. And to kind of like wrap up in the end here, don't want it to seem like we're kind of bashing cardio or anything by any stretch of the imagination, because for first and foremost, getting to a healthy standpoint is going to have kind of inherent benefits on your body composition, fat loss goal anyway. But just when push comes to shove, not overdoing it on that front, understanding some of the limitations there.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else on the back end of this one, Brian?
No, I think that wraps it up, man.
All right. Fantastic. So, as always, guys, thank you for listening. Brian and I wish you all best success in your efforts this year, as with all years. We'll be talking to you guys next week.